When the redone version of Twin Fantasy came out in 2018, most of the song's lyrics and structure had stayed roughly the same, with a couple of monologues being switched out and a couple of changes in the lines, but nothing that majorly changed the songwriting behind it. The main difference was in the sound and quality. Coming in with a much higher budget and more experience, Will was finally able to reach the intentions he had for the original album, recording in an actual studio rather than his college dorm closet, and being able to dedicate a lot more time and focus to the project. However, there were some major changes to the songwriting as well. One of the songs that went under the most changes was Famous Prophets, so much so that Will even changed the title, going from having a brackets minds to brackets stars at the end. The only other song on the album with any title changes is Stop Smoking, where they just added a brackets We Love You after, which is just a continuation of the main line of the song that is repeated throughout, and it doesn't really change much in how different it actually makes the title, rather just making it a bit easier for someone to find if they look the song up. And I think that the choice to change Famous Prophets made a lot of the sense. It's a quite deserving song for change. Not to say anything against the original, I love it, but Famous Prophets is a really reflective song, where Will is finally starting to accept the ending of his relationship and look back at it, as well as looking into the future, all outlined in just the first 2 lines of the song. Having been so long since the original album was written, and so many years since the relationship had ended, Will is left in the redone version with a lot more to say, being able to look back on the years without the tinted glasses of a young, heartbroken teen. Famous Prophets stars changed a lot past the sound and the production, not only of parts being replaced or taken out, but with huge sections being added to this song, including complete instrumental changes, and most noticeably it's 6 minutes longer than the original, making it 16 minutes and 10 seconds, which is just insane. The way that they reached this length, whilst keeping the song captivating and interesting, is not by just having 20 choruses, or by stretching out a typical pop structure, but by creating a unique and intriguing structure that fits the song perfectly, and complements the lyrics to create a story with them. This is one of the things that I love about Carseathead and their whole discography, how they continue to explore into these complex structures using creative formats to push past the limits of a typical pop and rock structure. And throughout history, a lot of the greatest songs were others that defy the binary they're set in. Beethoven added vocalists to Symphony. The Beach Boys created a pocket symphony to God of their own, with their outstanding and best-selling single at the time, Good Vibrations. A song like that was something no one was expecting at the time, but even that symphony isn't quite 4 minutes long, something slightly disappointing, knowing the 90 hours of recording tape they had for a song. Structure has always been a limiting factor in music, but especially looking at modern day. In the times where rock has been being popularized, there's the influence of record sizes and radio stations determining lengths of albums and how short a song needs to be for commercial success. No one wants to play a 60-minute long song on the radio, and this leads to a lot of projects at the time falling into the same trap of producing the same format over and over again because it's quick and catchy enough to get by in the limited space they have. And challenging this format can lead to songs being deemed too long for the radio, having them either be cut down or left out of the success it might have once reached. Despite this, a lot of the artists that choose to bend structures, creating their own unique ideas, create some of the most influential and intriguing songs of their time. And using these structures give much more depth to your typical verse, chorus format. Not to say that those can't work, but a song should be led by the idea behind it, and the structure should form around that, rather than forcing an idea into a tired format, killing part of the creativity. Famous Prophets is a perfect example of the lyrics and the structure coinciding to create this story. Now, before I get into the structure of Famous Prophets, I will not be talking about Famous Prophets' minds or the differences between this video too much, as I want to talk about what makes this song so unique. So let's look at the structure. So, Famous Prophets is 60 minutes long and it has very little repeating sections in it, making it an extremely complex structure, especially for a song in this genre. And when you get to a song this big in size and of this complex of a structure, you're no longer just looking at the small sections of the verses and the choruses, but rather taking a look at the bigger movements within the entire piece. And when we look at these movements, we put them into a nicer format if it is in 4 movements, making it a symphony. Now, what makes a symphony is 4 different movements, as already suggested. In a typical symphony, these are the 4 movements that you would go with, having different tempos or paces a little bit to achieve that. In this song, there are no tempo changes. There is one very brief little change in meter. The tempo of the song is 69 beats per minute and stays the same throughout, and it is in 4/4 for the most part, but there is that little brief part where it does change. And this is consistent throughout, so one could say it's not changing like it would in the symphony, but symphony's really been pushed as a definition. I mean, a lot of the most creative symphonies are the ones that don't go by that exact structure and rather create their own format to it. So it doesn't take much to be called a symphony, and I'm calling this a bit more of a pocket symphony, which I think was just just a term dubbed by a journalist or something talking about good vibrations originally. Could be a bit wrong on that, but I think that is where the term originated.
I would like to make a toast. Good vibrations, Brian's pocket symphony to God, and the best-selling single the Beach Boys ever had.
But what actually makes these 4 different movements? I'll go into a detail about every specific small section in a minute, but just in summary, each one is very different and tells its own progression whilst contributing to the overall song. For example, in the second movement we have like a new introduction. We have the first introduction, and this is a similar introduction to that, but it is a different bass line, and it could just be a different song. You could take it apart and it would be a different thing, and it would fit coherently by itself. The third movement is the one that's the most variation from the rest. It's a completely different sonic part. It was added to the song later on, not in the original, and that makes it, stand out a lot more. So let's get into what's actually happening in the song. In the introduction, all we hear is an isolated bass line. It's completely unaccompanied, and it goes on for 8 bars before starting to repeat itself again. Here is that bass line with the exact notes it is. Bass riff sets us up very well for the entirety of the next movement, as it brings in the notes that the majority of this movement is based around, introducing the key of the movement, F sharp minor, and it also starts to take us into the sonic world that this song is based in, and it starts to slow us down from what came prior in the album, getting ready for this, huge song. The introduction lasts from bars 1 to 8, which is from the start to 20 seconds in. This leads us steadily into our first verse, where we hear the bass riff repeated another 2 times, making it go through bars 9 to 24, which is 27 seconds to 1 minute and 23 seconds. And that's just Will's voice over the bass. And once you reach bar 17, we get these simple drums just start to join in. And start to build up the song. The bass also does stray off the original riff a little bit. It starts to play around a bit more around bar 17, and it makes it a bit more interesting. This is a tab for the first 3 repetitions of the bass riff. As you can see, it remains on the same basis, but a few notes are altered here and there, and by the third it's definitely progressed a lot more. Now these are the lyrics of the first verse. I've already spoken a little bit about the first 2 lines, but what they're doing is just setting up for the rest of the song, and it's really the first time where we see Will just accept the ending of his relationship. This is brought to a further depth in meaning by the fact that he's not addressing his partner directly, but rather his dream of what they would be, something that could happen no longer. No matter what happens, they will never be teenagers again, and this dream has been left as nothing more than a fantasy. For this next line, there are a couple of different meanings you could get out of it, one being about the change in audio as Will switches from recording with a cassette to digitally, and how the loss of the softer sound hurts his ears.
Different ways of recording too. I did have tape recorders as well, and I remember some sort of setup where I would be recording onto tape and then setting up a computer microphone to get it on the computer, and then overdubbing, like having a different tape and recording that in, and ending up with these overdubbed tape things.
Another meaning you could get out of it is saying how the tape is what's holding the relationship together, and how when you take tape off a piece of paper, a lot of the time it'll rip the paper with it. I think the first meaning is more likely, but I think both ideas are interesting. The last line of these 8 bars is somewhat self-explanatory, but I find that, especially in the delivery of the original, the emphasis on the word you and this person's individuality gives much more meaning to how special this person is to Will. To quit is a simple action, but to do it so uniquely is a feature only the person perceiving can attach. The next 4 lines continue this theme of acceptance as time passes, and are some of my favourite lyrics in the song. The imagery is fantastic. Having identical bruises shows really clear intent with a somewhat disturbing image of the distraught Will's going to, forcing him to this point of anger, kicking his car, which most likely he was recording in at the time, and doing so with so much passion that it leaves these bruises so strong that they represent his relationship, full of anger, harm, and Will's pain. Them fading shows an obvious link to him slowly moving on from his relationship, and this line reminds me slightly of one from Happy News to Sadness, where one can recover from their pain, but ultimately will just be back where they started. These lines all hit somewhat personal to me in a strangely literal sense. I cut myself carving a necklace for someone's birthday once, but got broken up with before I could give it to them, leaving a scar that I had to watch slowly heal, and it's a very strange and somewhat haunting experience, watching your body slowly get rid of this part of you that reminds you of someone else. After this quite slow of a start, we get this explosion into the guitar solo, which lasts through bars 25 to 32, which is 1 minute and 23 seconds to 1 minute and 51 seconds. And it's just a complete change up from before. It really just starts to get this flood of sound going and really picks up speed for the rest of the song. There are some vocals on this, although it is mainly instrumental, and the vocals that are there are just quite in the background, and it's just kind of cut up. It's not the focus of the section whatsoever. This is what the solo sounds like. Next up we hit verse 2, which is where things start to get a bit more interesting in the song. Contrasting the prior verse 1, verse 2 is actually built up out of 3 repetitions of this bass line, making it last from bars 33 to 56, which is 1 minute and 51 seconds to 3 minutes and 14 seconds. So it's definitely longer, and you could probably argue if this was in the context of a smaller song that it isn't just one verse, but within this context of a much larger song, it's either 3 separate verses or 1, and it's much easier to put it down as 1. Now the reason why it's 3 rather than 2 is because what would have fit as 1 verse is split in half by just a different 8 bars that is quite contrasting to either side of it. The bass riff though throughout this entire thing is starting to be played around with a bit more, just changing a few notes every now and then and keeping it more interesting. Compared to the guitar solo, we get this drop in sound. It gets a bit quieter, allowing the vocals to be back on top of the mix, and so you can really hear them and take them in a bit more. The guitar does continue through, however, initially not very promptly, just kind of adding every now and then, but it does start to pick up near the end, from about bar 41 onwards especially. And what makes this verse get cut in half is that after 8 bars, we get these quite beautiful overdub vocals from Will that kind of just go on top, and it really changes up the dynamic of the vocals and the melody of this whole section, making it already just this far into the song, and we're already getting quite interesting kind of subsections of structure just within the verses. In this whole section, the drums start to get a lot more prominent compared to in verse 1, where it was just kind of those hi-hats coming in. Lyrically, verse 2 has a lot going on. At first glance, the first line of verse 2 is Will saying he's never going to touch his partner's hands again, but that's not exactly what Will is saying, or emphasizing at least. Rather that even if he were to return to his relationship, even if it wasn't over, it would never be the same. Once shattered, there will always be cracks, and they will never be teenagers again. You can only have one first love, you can only be a teenager for so long, and the feeling of this being ruined can often feel so impactful, because Will will never be able to experience such pure love having gone through so much pain. Will can hold as many hands as he likes, but his hands will never be the same. The next few lines I don't quite know how to explain, but I think that the simplicity is what brings out the emotion in these. There's probably something to be said about the usage of the word had being a past tense, but I don't know. I think it's just a very simple thought that replicates that of heartbreak, and this sort of drawn out space in between the words really brings out the impact to that simple but relatable thought. I really like the usage of the phrase etc. here, because it's usually used as a signifier for the end of a point, saying something's going to go on and on so there's no point in continuing. But in the song, this is immediately followed by a huge amount of overdubs of Will asking questions and thoughts flowing over each other, creating this sense that Will is trying to change the subject with what he's saying, but he's getting drawn back by his relationship taking up his mind. In the next 8 bars, there's a lot going on, with the 2 main vocal lines going over each other. Both of these, however, are filled with questions. Every single line ends in a question, and there are even more throughout the lines. The second vocal part ends every line either asking, "Are you mine?" or "Are you gone?" really bringing out this doubt and worry that's lingering in his mind, intruding on his main train of thought, and this feeling is replicated by the way that these vocals are overdubbed and sort of floating over the main part, influencing his thoughts. The main vocal part is also just asking questions, trying to understand his new life. The last 8 bars of verse 2 is mainly a reusage of a chorus to an old Nervous Young Men song. Nervous Young Men, for anyone who doesn't know, is Will's old high school band, and this particular song is the title track to the album Bell Drop, which I believe is the first public release that Will ever had. This is what the chorus sounds like there. And this is compared to the new rendition that we get in Famous Prophets.
I'm not gonna end up a nervous wreck like the people I know who are nervous wrecks. So I'm not gonna name names. Yours was an exception. Did the sound just stop? At the end of every day, there'll be nothing left to say. There'll be no backstage pass.
Now, aside from the much calmer and reflective rendition that we're hearing here, the only main difference is the addition of the line that yours was an exception. This is because in the original Twin Fantasy, Will directly names his partner throughout. The last few lines of these bars are basically saying that words can't change the past, with the line, "there'll be no backstage pass," being a pretty direct metaphor for this. From verse 2, we flow immediately into verse 3. 3 spans from bars 57 to 72, and that has 3 minutes and 14 seconds to 4 minutes and 10 seconds. This is where we start to build out of this movement, where we get to what becomes the more important sections, and we get this repeating overdub from Will, starting to build it up, and you've heard in a couple of Carsey songs where the repetition really starts to build up the sound, and everything starts to pick up a little bit more. There's an overdub from some voice at bar 61, which I can't quite tell who it is, but I don't think it is Will. If you know who it is, let me know, because I have no clue. For the first 8 bars of this verse, it isn't the same chords as the other verses, rather it's just based around a simple E chord. And after we get through those 8 bars is where we get the return of the guitar solo, and it is still in continuity with Will's voice. Will's yelling, and we get this huge flood of sound just all flowing about halfway through the verse, where the chords do change to an E, A, B chord progression. Pretty much this whole section is a callback to Will's recording The End of the Golden Age, which is a sort of cover of Beck's Golden Age, but it's more inspired by rather than just a straight cover, as this section isn't in Beck's Golden Age, rather Will adding to it. This recording is where Lord of Famous Prophets was born and started to develop, as you can hear what becomes the guitar solo in the background of this section. So from verse 3, this huge flood of instrumentation flows over into what I'm going to call the instrumental rise and collapse. This spans from bars 73 to 88, which is 4 minutes and 10 seconds to 5 minutes and 6 seconds. And there's just a huge instrument with an extremely thick texture. The lyrics stop in this part, but you can still hear some of Will's vocals. Nothing too centralized, but what you would expect in a Carsey song, so you can hear Will, yelling and screaming in the background. The chords change back to what they were in verses 1 and 2, but the bass line I think is played a bit higher and is changed up a little bit. And at the end of bar 88 is when we conclude the first movement. The movement works as quite a simple progression. It starts off slow, slowly builds up, and we get this huge ending. It in itself is already 5 minutes long and could basically be a song alone. But from there we move on to our second movement, where we get a very similar introduction to the first, except for this time it is a different riff being played. Here's that riff. I'm really stupid and really tired, so I edited the wrong bass thing for this, so it's just gonna jump halfway through, so I didn't realize that I was halfway and I'm too tired to redo it. Isolated. You hear the guitar from prior kind of ring on, and you hear the drums sort of crash slowly into the movement. You also hear this static noise being cut in and out. Now the key here is a little bit more ambiguous in the first movement. Originally I thought it would be in D major because that's the first note played, but it doesn't quite sit well there, and I believe it is more accurately in A major. I'm really bad at theory, so I got my friend who's more competent in key signatures to check it for me, and this is what he said.
Basically, what I'm saying is it does this. So I think it ends there, which is A major.
So I think we're going with A major, but if I am wrong, let me know, because I just don't understand it that much. This does make a lot more sense though, as A major is the relative major to F sharp minor, meaning it's a perfectly reasonable modulation. So the introduction lasts from bars 89 to 96, which is 5 minutes and 6 seconds to 5 minutes 33 seconds. And it is quite a similar introduction as the movement prior. In the next part, verse 4, spanning from bars 97 to 112, which is 5 minutes and 33 seconds to 6 minutes and 29 seconds. It's quite an interesting verse. Will is delivering these heavy lines, but it's a bit distorted and it's an intimate sound. And it sounds some more similar to him talking with some melody to it than him singing it. It's a very impactful moment of just hearing Will say these profound lines. The vocals are also chopped up. They start up panned quite noticeably to the left ear and then a bit more to the right, and it's kind of jumping around like little cuts of more static. The vocals get cut to being panned right after about 4 bars. And the vocals drop out completely at bar 105, where we hear these hi-hats start playing and the guitar start to pick up, with a new guitar joining at 109, which starts to flow us into the next section. These are the lyrics of verse 4. I'm struggling to add too much depth further than what you can hear. Will doesn't want to be thought of as more than the average person. He cares so much about his partner that even when joking, the idea of death just affects him too much. Something about the phrasing in this line I love, just something about the imperative next to the casual next line using like rather than love, where I think it comes through almost slightly humorous. The fact that Will says he likes them the best implies that it is out of a group, being out the casualty of predicting death and the discussions of when is going to die within Will's life and the lives of the people around him. So much of that everyone in this hypothetical group has predicted their death, and that Will has created this idea of which ones would affect him the most. It really puts into perspective the depressing and dark life that Will was living. It goes with easy implication that predicting your death goes hand in hand with depression, and the casualty of this just shows how much of an everyday part of life this is becoming for Will. By talking about how he likes them the best, it brings out how disconnected Will feels to the people around him, to the point where it doesn't bother him as much when they're predicting his death, showing that he could feel isolated and like this relationship is all he has, making the tragedy of it falling apart so much worse. You Know I Love Your Art is him just obviously talking about his infatuation with Kate's work, which is seen as a huge inspiration throughout many sections of his discography. Verse 5, lasting from bars 113 to 136, which is 6 minutes and 29 seconds to 7 minutes and 53 seconds, starts with the vocals joining back in as we hear the line, "The ocean washed over your grave, the ocean washed open your grave." An obvious callback to Beach Life and Death, and what is a good Carseathead song without a callback? This verse goes by the same chords, but the bass again starts to jump around a bit more, and after about 8 bars, the drums start to pick up with more than just the hi-hats we've been hearing before, and with that the guitar starts to pick up, and from that we start to get into our pre-chorus. The lyrics here are an obvious callback to Beach Life and Death, and it's a motif used quite often. It made the cover work, it's quite an important part of it. Here is something that Will had to say about this if you'd like to read it, and I don't think I can explain it much better than him. Moving past this, we reach the pre-chorus. So in the pre-chorus, lasting from bars 137 to 144, which is 7 minutes and 53 seconds to 8 minutes and 20 seconds, we quite quickly get this flooding sound, and the texture starts to build up and get thicker and thicker, and we hear a lot of distortion. It's a really big sound, and the vocals from prior do continue over into the pre-chorus, but we have the main vocals get layered over the top of it, and we have these really passionate delivering from Will. It's a great part of the song. Here, the first 2 lines are talking about how when an artist finds their holy grail and they make their best work, it ultimately can become so popular that it will fade into a cliche, basically dooming itself from the start of a fate that Will doesn't want to see his own work fall into. This thought's so great because it puts so simply a thought that typically doesn't come to mind. For example, the Beatles. As you can probably tell, I'm a big Beatles fan. I got these, got some of these. Fuck, the sock I'm using as a pop filter is a Beatles sock. But the Beatles are a band that I wouldn't always, expect this fate to come to. Being the biggest band of all time, and having had such a huge influence on music as a whole, you expect them to never fade into a cliche, to always be this huge standout band. And whilst in a lot of cases this is true, especially with the resurgence of Beatles fandom with Get Back coming out, one thing that I've found is due to their popularity and the influences they've had on music, when I've tried to show them to people who have similar music taste to me, who I know would enjoy it, a lot of times see it as more of a cliche, as having heard so many artists that have become inspired by them, even with the Beatles having had so many different sounds throughout their short time, they don't see them as these insane revolutionary albums because what they've been listening to their whole lives is so heavily inspired by it, and will shrug them off before even giving the music a real chance as just another cliche. I know that probably extends a bit past the intention of the line, but I just thought it was an interesting thought. Anyway, back to lyrics. The delivery on the vocals in this section are really emotional, and here we just really dig into this grave motif, and the influence of art in Will's life, relationship, and emotion. In these lines, I think that the word you is addressing art, similar to the line, art gets what it wants and art gets what it deserves from Nervous Young and Humans. Will is just giving up his life for art. Here he is threatening to give art what it wants. By making art, by singing another song, Will is letting himself fall into this depression, reburying his emotions, and this time nailing his grave shut, permanently slowly retiring himself to this life of pain, depression, and art. The idea of the hammer could also be in reference or inspired by Pink Floyd's The Wall, which is an album that Will was greatly influenced by at the time. I think something that's so powerful about this section is it's talking about how writing songs is feeding into this burial of Will's emotions. By playing the song, by listening to the song right now, we already know the outcome. And this leads us into our chorus, which is pretty much sonically the same. This lasts from bars 145 to 152, meaning 8 minutes and 20 seconds to 8 minutes and 48 seconds. And the ocean washed over your grave vocals continue over into this section. All of the instrumentation and the vocals just continue to build up and become more frantic before collapsing into the instrumental. To start off the lyrics, we have this image of a mirror breaking, another motif that is filtered throughout both the original album and expanded on in the new album. It can have multiple meanings. In start, it's reference to childhood, which gets expanded on the sample used later on at the end of the song, which we'll talk about when we get there. This motif is also used to show how Will views his lover as an extent of himself, with the image of two mirrors causing a infinite reflection. But as soon as one mirror breaks, all of this illusion disappears, leaving Will looking only at himself, stuck in reality. No matter how painful the experience of this mirror breaking might be, it's a necessary step for Will to snap out of his idealistic relationship that he has dreamed himself into. Now for the rest of the chorus, it's important to have context and understand the idea of the pain star. For those of you who don't know, the pain star is a concept that originates from Kate Wirtz's comics, which already stated Will was deeply inspired by. I haven't read the comics yet, but I think it comes from the Lame Zone comics, I think the first one, which I think is also where the nice young Satanist with braces comes from, and even the drum maybe. The idea is that if you touch the pain star, which only comes once every 1,000 years or more, it causes the worst pain you could possibly feel, but only quickly and then it will stop. We'll talk about this in the rant at the end of Nervous Young Inhumans, where it's questioning, given the option, would you touch it? Feel the worst pain possible, just for the rare experience to know what it's like, and how it affects you.
A pain star has entered your house. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to touch it? It only happens once every 1,000 years. Maybe even 2,000 years. And how long is a year, really?
The idea of the black star could also be a reference to David Bowie's album and song, something that Will has covered before and has shown a clear love for.
This was the first that caught my eye.
Have you heard it yet?
Oh yeah, I've listened to it lots of times, but I want a copy of my own. It's one of my favorites for 2015.
At the center of it all. At the center of it all. Your eyes.
It could also be in reference to the Radiohead song. Either can work if you look at them from a different lens. I think in this chorus, Will is equating the mirror breaking to that of touching the pain star. To break his fantasy could be the most painful experience of his life, seeing everything he's dreamed of fall apart as the mirror breaks. But he views that pain as somewhat necessary, having just talked about how much he would do for art, how many emotions he would bury, how many dreams he will shatter. At the end of the day, art gets what it wants and art gets what it deserves. And the beauty of Twin Fantasy and Famous Prophets really is it answers the question itself of if Will would touch the pain star. The whole frantic repetition of him asking did they tell you what happens when you touch it, and him yelling let me, just feels like this burden of anger and pain that's been building up and destroying Will. But also how the sentence slowly condenses to just a repetition of let me is making Will very central, whilst he's trying to portray his pain in metaphors and art. At the end of the day, it all leads back to him. All of this is his emotion and his art that everything is leading to. From the chorus, the vocals slow down and we flow into an instrumental. The instrumental lasts from bars 153 to 172, which is 8 minutes and 48 seconds to 9 minutes 53, and I would call this an instrumental collapse rather than the rise and collapse we had before. We've already had the huge build up and the sound is all there, and it just kind of starts to create this huge collapse and everything starts to kind of go in on itself almost, I'd say. There are still a few vocals in the instrumental where Will's just kind of have flooded over from the chorus. Sonically, the first 8 bars are mostly the same, but we start to get this rise and kind of frantic sound as the guitars are playing the same chords, but the notes that they're playing are going up and playing higher and higher notes, and it starts to all build up and get ready for the collapse that's going to happen. And after that, the drums just drop out and we get this quite repetitive strumming sound of the guitars, and it's almost mainly just static at that point where there's just a lot of distorted sound coming through. And especially the last 4 bars, we get this kind of repetitive strumming similar to the franticness and the fragmentation of Will's let me. Everything starts to ring out for the last 4 bars, and we get this kind of leftover sound of distorted guitars occasionally strumming and a couple notes being played, and it starts to slow down and just all bleed out. And this is where we get our change in meter. Kinda. Now the reason why this is a bit of a weird thing to call it a change in meter is because there isn't any noticeable change in the time much. It's just the fact that this gets cut off, you know, before it fully rings out, kind of. So I don't know if they actually wrote it like this. Maybe they recorded the things completely separately, it didn't matter to them when they put it all together. But for continuity's sake of when I was putting it into Logic, just so that the beats lined up, I put it through 2/4 for one bar, just because what would have happened otherwise is we would have started the next movement, which cuts in quite quickly, on the second beat of the bar, and everything would have been, you know, 2 beats behind. So moving it for 2/4 just makes it so in the third movement we start on the first beat of the bar, and it's in 4/4 again, rather than being halfway through, and if you put a metronome to it, it kind of messes everything up. This is what it sounds like with the metronome to it, just to make it make a bit more sense.
Too cliche. If the music has forsaken you, roll the...
So from there we get to movement 3. This is a completely new section, it wasn't in the original at all, and it's quite a nice addition in my opinion. This is one of the most definitive movements, it's completely separate from the rest of the song really. It contrasts the other parts of the song and brings light to this part of the song, giving it so much more emphasis to allow the really impactful parts of this to shine out. Whilst being a much slower and more intimate sound, we kick off right away with this. Whether the complete cut with no reverb, nothing lasting over it, it's a complete just tape cut really. And we go straight into it from the last movement, where we enter our verse 6, which could kind of be considered another pre-chorus. It's similar to the pre-chorus before lyrically and melodically with the vocals, but it's different. So I wasn't quite sure if to call it verse 6 or pre-chorus, but we're just going to call it verse 6 for now. This section lasts from bars 173 to 179, which is from 9 minutes 53 seconds to 10 minutes and 20 seconds. And this is a really impactful part of the song. It's a very intimate and isolated sound where you just hear the piano while vocals over it. The piano plays the chords D, C sharp minor, B minor, and A, and then a B minor chord and a C sharp minor chord played to circle back with a D note or something played in between. So it goes D, C sharp minor, B minor, A, B minor, C sharp minor, and it continues on with a few alterations that add to the melody from there. And there are no other instruments that I'll play in this section apart from the guitar, which is played 2 notes, somewhat randomly, and it just kind of adds to the melody that's being built on the piano, as there's an occasional drift of a note on the right hand, building up the melody. The lyrics in this section are filled with a lot of references to older bands, with that so descending to cliche line returning. It's clear that Will doesn't want his art to have the same fate. There's the roll the stone over the grave line, which could be a reference to the Rolling Stones, and it could also be talking about how Will is moving away from this grave motif, after seeing other artists who made the same sacrifice for art falling into this fate of cliche. The line, "If the levee breaks," is likely a reference to the Led Zeppelin song, "When the Levee Breaks," and the last line is talking about how these bands have watched as their art slowly fades from the mainstream and eventually gets replaced, leaving them as an old cliche. From this we quite easily flow into the chorus, which lasts through bars 180 to 187, which is 10 minutes and 20 seconds to 10 minutes and 48 seconds. In this section it's just a continuation of the piano and Will's voice, and there's an occasional, drift of the note adding to the melody as said before, but the chords do stay the same. And in this we get a much calmer rendition of the chorus, where we get a breath of clarity compared to the much more convoluted, confused and frantic rendition we had earlier. It adds a lot more thoughtfulness to it, where before the vocals were drowned in a flood of sound and other vocals going over it, here we get just the really calming but thought through vocals. I think this part of the song is one of the most impactful changes from mirror to face, showing that breath of clarity that Will's had since the original release. It's no longer the convoluted, hard to digest emotions, but instead it's very direct and thoughtful. Obviously, being a chorus, this section shares very similar lyrics to the chorus prior, but in the questions at the end there is a clear change where Will isn't caught up in all this angst. Rather, due to the reflective nature of this chorus, his questions are less directed about himself so much, but him posing the question to himself. The ending I found to just be profound due to its simplicity. Someone did say it could have a possible reference, so here that is if you want to read it. After this we get a gentle flow into the piano instrumental, which lasts from bars 188 to 198, which are 10 minutes and 48 seconds to 11 minutes and 26 seconds. For the first 8 bars of this section we get that flown over falsetto from the chorus, where it's just Will singing "You" in his beautiful voice, and it's a really just beautiful and emotional part of the song. A much calmer part than the rest of the song, where we get this real slow down and, reflective atmosphere. After 8 bars, the vocals drop out, leaving us with just 8 bars of completely isolated piano before we flow into the rise, giving us one last breath of clarity before the intensity continues to build. These are all of the piano that happens pretty much throughout the entire song. I did not make this, so no credit to me. At bar 199 we get the reintroduction of the instrumentation that the rest of the song has been in, where we start to have the instrumental rise that comes, and this lasts till bar 231, making this span from 11 minutes and 26 seconds to 13 minutes and 21 seconds. And this is a really different and impactful rise compared to the rest of the instrumentals that we've had so far. It starts off with just a bass joining in with the left hand of the piano, backing it up a little bit and starting to slowly flow into the instrumentation. And then when we hit bars 2-110 is when we start to get the real rise of this, and when we get to the really intriguing part of this movement. We get these chopped up samples that come really quickly, and then what could just be not a hi-hat being repeated like a hi-hat, or a hi-hat being played. That sounds very similar to the kind of just chopped up sample I had before. Which very quickly go and quite quickly cut off as well, where we get this synth that starts to join in and build a much grander sound, and it kind of just floods in from the back, and it's really like a atmospheric sound. At bar 216 we get this vocal sampling coming in, and it's saying, I gain nothing, I have love, I gain nothing. The sample used here is from the international version of Confinesse, with some slight variations. We then get a variety of different drum sounds and samples that start to come in and out, and they're just changing it up, and it keeps it quite interesting, and it's really adding a lot. And these vocal samples start to get layered over each other, and it just all starts to build up and up, where there's more and more layers of the vocal samples, the drums start to switch up, and then you get one drum over the other drum. There's a lot of different sounds that we haven't heard at all in the song before, really on the album before, and it all starts to build up, and the synth's getting louder, and everything's, getting layered over each other, the text is getting thicker and thicker, and then on the last bar the drums just really kick in, and we just explode into the next section. I actually didn't analyze the next section that much, to be honest. I think it's just a huge amount of sound, so it's kind of hard to go too much detail into. I just called this Pain Star. It's mainly just an instrumental, but you have a lot of vocals in it, with Will just yelling and his voice being cut in and out, and it's a really great part, just kind of hard to talk a lot about without spending way too long discovering everything there into it. It's similar-ish to these other instrumentals we've had at the ends of movement 1 and 2, but it's a lot more than that. It's, everything that this song has been building up to so far, all being packed into one, where it's just this huge amount of sound, and it's really emotional, and it's a great part, and it lasts from bars 232 to 264, which is 13 minutes and 21 seconds to 15 minutes and 16 seconds. It's really long, and it's just a really great emotional part. This is why I consider it to be a different movement, because it is just kind of like a hit and then just a completely change in sonically. But I wouldn't know if I could just call this a prolonged outro or not, but I think calling it movement makes it a lot smoother. The crazy Will yelling parts here are all lines from My Boy, the first track on the album, but they're much more broken up and destroyed, and having them this way just shows how fallen apart this initial fantasy Will had at the start of the album has become, with the line "we won't be alone" not being included, just to emphasize how alone Will is. Harmonically, it's really hard to tell what's going on here, just because everything's so distorted, it's hard to tell what the chords are. This is as far as I got with what the guitar was doing, and I don't even think the chords in the background are right. Not much more to analyze on that. It's really just one of those things where it's so impactful at the end if you listen to it yourself, so I'm not going to speak too much about it. We then get the outro, which is where we hear the vocal samples we heard a bit earlier on in the movement prior, and you can hear them fairly clearly, and it's a nice outro. There's been such a huge build up, it's quite hard to come up with anything to end a song here. A nice little slow down for the next song on the album, where you just hear the guitars kind of play their riff and everything, but a lot of the sound comes out of it. It becomes a lot less distorted and thick of texture, and just a smaller sound, and you hear the bass and the guitar, and it all slowly fades out, and you get the sample that ends it just completely isolated. The final sample is a direct Bible quote from 1 Corinthians 13 verse 8 to 13. In the original quote, however, it ends with the words, "and now these 3 remain." 3 being in reference to faith, hope, and love. This could be saying that one of these no longer remains after the album, and by not specifying anything, it leaves some ambiguity to it. It could also just be that using 2 makes more sense for the album, because it could be referring to how it's 2 different albums, or how Will is creating this image of himself, one in reality and one fantasy. So it's really up to you what you get from that change of word. The outro lasts from bars 265 to 280, and it ends on the first and a half beat. That is 16 minutes and 10 seconds, making it 15 minutes 16 seconds to the end of the song, which is 16 minutes and 10 seconds. It's a great little outro. It really works at just slowing the song down. I don't think there's much more he could have done to make a better outro. And and it leads really well to the next song. Anyway, I think it's an amazing structure. At least to me, it feels quite different than most of the other songs of the album, because, I mean, it's just like a masterpiece. Beach Life and Death, as much as it is an amazing song, a lot of the album is kind of anchored by that, so it all fits into that song almost a bit, and that song fits in the album quite well. And I'll say this doesn't fit in the album, it does. It just really stands out as its own independent thing. It's so immensely long, and it has, a start, a finish, 4 movements in it, quite a coherent storyline to it, really. It's reflective in its lyrics, just starting off with apologies to future me and you. It's a great song, and truly a masterpiece of writing. Hello, thank you for watching the video if you did. I was gonna go outside to film the outro, but then I remembered I'm a car seat fan, so I'm sat next to a window, but that's as close as I'll get. Yeah, this video took way too fucking long to make. I basically started it 3 months ago, but then I had exams, and I also don't know how to edit, so that took me way longer than I probably should have. And I basically just got really busy, and then for the past 2 weeks I was last stretch, not much left to do. I've been saying I was gonna finish this. I've said to someone every day, I'm gonna finish this by tomorrow, or upload this tomorrow, probably for the past 5 days now. So if I can even get this out today, it'll be a miracle. I'm also using my mom's shitty ass MacBook. It cannot run my definitely paid for Final Cut Pro, and it has been a mess. If I ever make a long video again, I'm doing it in sections, because by the end I couldn't press delete without a minute of delay. Yeah, so announcements. Big, huge announcements. I'm gonna actually make a couple socials under the same name as this channel, because I'm working on an album, and then I just want them. So hopefully when this goes up, there should be an Instagram in the description, maybe a couple other things. I'm working on a Discord server, I'm at least thinking of one. On my last video that was about a car seat song, I put my Discord in the description, so I could send people scripts to the video, and I actually got a lot of people who just messaged me. Well, a lot is 5, but that was a lot to me, and it was nice, it was great, and now I've met a couple people who are I've listened to their music and stuff. It was great. So I might make a Discord server where I can post all the scripts to my videos, if they're ones with scripts, and also just to meet people, because it's fun. That'll be in a little bit though. For now, if you just want to add me on Discord, I'll have it in the description. So then if I do make a server, I can just invite everyone straight away and kind of wait till I've got enough people that will actually work. I also want to say a huge thank you to Def That The Movies on Instagram. He was the one that sent in the bass videos for me, and I was going to have someone else do it, and we've been working on it for a while, but their bass got stolen, so can't do much about that. So thank you to Deep Sleeper on Bandcamp. If you want to go check out their stuff, it's great. I don't think I'm going to do any more of these videos for a little bit at least, because this took way longer than expected. I kept on thinking I was going to finish it, and then I'd wake up and I would just have a day of empty time planned to edit, and I'd wake up and immediately something happens and the rest of the day is just gone, and then I'm like, shit, I don't have time to edit. If I do though, it'll probably be in a while, and it'll be a full album, analysis kind of thing, on either How to Leave Town or My Back Is Killing Me Baby, because I think there's 2 albums that there's a lot to be said about them, and slightly less has been said about them, at least compared to Twin Fantasy or Teens in Denial. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Working on an album, it'll be at some point there. I don't know what's gonna happen. I've scrapped so much of it, lost a lot to USB. Maybe one day it'll come out. If it does, it'll be on Bandcamp, I guess. I don't know. Thank you.